you should make returns available to shoppers. And again, want to optimize for long term, right? And so if that's your goal as a brand, optimize for long term and LTV, then you should make that experience as available as possible, right? And think about it as part of the experience rather than like, I want to avoid it at all costs.
Welcome to Parcel Perspectives, the podcast dedicated to small parcel shippers. I'm Glenn Gooding, and each episode we dive into insights, best practices, and strategies to help you navigate this complex and costly market. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Parcel Perspectives. This is Glenn Gooding. I have an exciting, I find it exciting, topic to discuss with you with my guest. I'll introduce him in just a moment. The ugly term called returns. We're going to take a glass half full approach this time, and we're going to find out, can you approach a returns program as an opportunity rather than a cost? So, without further ado, joining me today is Jordan Bleak, General Manager of Returns and Head of Post Sales at Redo. Jordan spends his days helping brands turn what most see as a headache, returns that is, into an opportunity. At Redo, he focuses on strategies that make exchanges easier, improve operations, and create a better customer experience. Jordan, thanks for being here. I'm excited to dive into this with you.
Looking forward to it.
Great. So if you don't mind, for our listeners, you mind sharing a little bit about your background and what in the world led you to this niche area called returns?
Yeah, I'd love to. It's actually just an interesting path. It's not super intentional, to be honest, but I've fallen in love with it now. I'm a Utah native, so grew up in a place called Bountiful, Utah. A lot of tech around here. And so growing up for me, I actually was really into sports and competing and played basketball, football, baseball, soccer, everything. Loved basketball and actually got to play on with some very good people. 3 of our starting 5 in high school ended up playing professionally.
Wow.
And so it was just a fun, got to compete growing up. And professionally, I share that just because it's actually influenced a lot of my decision making in my career. I studied finance at BYU, and during that time had an internship offer that said, hey, let us know within 24 hours if you want to accept this. And it just felt super rushed. And so I knew someone working at a startup called Divvy here locally. At the time, no one had ever heard of the name or anything, but I went in and sat down with the founder, Blake Murray, and he got on the whiteboard, drew everything up of everything about the company. I understood zero of it, but it was the first time that I felt like there was someone that I could almost go compete with in almost like sports again. So that's what really drew me. I didn't even know what I signed up for. It was literally just, hey, just come work here. And came and worked, ended up doing a lot with post sales, upselling, and a lot on just like the revenue front at Divvy. The company ended up going from really, when I started, it was sub-million run rate. Ended up selling 3.5 years later for $2.5 billion and has continued growing. About a year after the acquisition, honestly, I just loved startups, loved competing, and found Redo. Redo actually had a lot of similarities to Divvy. Just Divvy was a software product solving a very big pain point that was actually free or monetized in a free way and sold to SMB companies. And Redo, it actually started very similarly, a really big pain point with returns that was monetized in a unique way that was free to SMB companies, and this time in e-commerce specifically. So that's actually what originally drew me. And so me and a few others from Divvy ended up kind of looking into this, seeing a lot of the similarities, and thought, this is actually a great opportunity. So that's what led me to e-commerce. And since then, I've just fallen in love with the world of e-com and working with brands. It's just some of the best things about the US and what I love with entrepreneurship and seeing that all out in e-com. And returns was the big pain point. So that's how I got here.
You bet it is. Boy, you're athletic, you're competitive, and you're smart. Finance degree at BYU. Good.
It's a lot of fun. Been blessed to get to learn from a lot of great people along the way.
Great. Let's dive in, if you don't mind. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Why do most e-commerce brands still view returns as a cost rather than an opportunity? That's the obvious question.
The honest answer is just that it's painful. It's a cost center in a lot of ways. It's expensive. E-com brands, they paid the ads to get customers to buy, paid the free shipping, and now they're getting hit with the refund where they're not actually actualizing anything that they paid for. And so it makes a lot of sense why that happens. You're also like, there's a bunch of hidden costs in there too. You're also paying for the employment to get the item back, to unpackage it, inspect it, get it back ready to sell. And just that whole process is pretty painful. So you can see where the negative sentiment comes into play from brands.
I certainly can. A lot of cost, a lot of shrinkage, right? There's a lot of product comes back you can't resell, right?
Totally.
So it is a big deal. What would you say are some of the biggest operational and customer experience challenges that the businesses are facing today when managing returns?
Yeah, I really think about the challenges in kind of two buckets. One is like the physical operational challenges, and then I'll call them technical challenges. In terms of the operational challenges, those are actually the easiest to understand that brands think about, and it is what we just talked about. Getting items back efficiently. Are they ready to sell again, or can you get them back ready to sell or not? Restocking, the work to get it back into your inventory and all those systems, making those all work. Obviously, painful challenge. Some of the ones that brands overlook often are what I call those technology challenges. And it actually starts in the purchase experience. So even before people are making returns, there's a pain point and a challenge of, is your policy meeting the expectations of your customer base? And just with Amazon and what they've done in the world, which is speed, and you can get a return on anything for any reason at any time, there's just a new expectation that the consumers have for what a brand should offer on the returns front. And so brands, does your policy match those expectations? In a lot of ways, are you advertising your policy in the right way to de-risk the purchase with the shopper? And anyway, Redo actually started with this whole coverage model where you actually offer like a free return at checkout. It says, hey, pay a little more, you get a free return on the back end. And that was how we monetize and could offer this for free. We've since branched out into a lot of other things with it, but that was actually the initial place we started, which is actually in the shopper journey of purchasing. Some of the other technology challenges are now like on the back end with the actual return process, where brands that don't have a system to manage returns, there's email that's just back and forth and you don't really know why. They just say, hey, I want to return this. Great, here's your label. And you're missing out on so many key details about why on a critical part of the customer journey. Some others are exchange rate. So people aren't optimized for exchanges. I'm sure I'll chat about that. Just really passionate about driving exchange rate for brands. There's data that you're missing. Just if there is a bad experience, they're not coming back, and then even fraud. So those are all kind of some of the challenges that we hear from brands.
So tell me if I'm off base here. I'm going to take a layman's perspective on returns categorically. One bucket would be what I view as the product didn't fit, it didn't meet expectations, wrong item, something like that, right? Where the buyer is dissatisfied with what they received for some reason. The second, and this is where I get to pick on my wife a little bit, okay? I'll give you an example. If I buy a pair of shoes online, real good chance I buy one pair of shoes. I know what size I wear, I get it, I'm good to go. My wife, on the other hand, if she buys a pair of shoes, she's going to buy 3 pairs of them in 3 different sizes to ensure she has the one that feels the best, and she's going to return the other 2. So it's really not a dissatisfaction, it's like an over-purchase, if you will. First off, am I off base with kind of those categorical kind of assumptions?
You can for sure see it, right? If you know it's the exact same item, just different sizes, they're bracketing. And so there's actually a couple of interesting learnings that we've had related to bracketers. And in some ways, if you think about the economics of a brand, you know a return is coming back on that purchase. And so there's actually some interesting things that you can or should do. One is, could you at checkout on the confirmation page, when that happens, actually say, hey, you want to just get one of these, and this is most likely your size, have some of those sizing charts to help them. Or say, hey, take a discount if you only want one. One of the other things that we've learned is, if you already know that you or they are going to be paying for a return label to send things back, add as much into that order as you can. And so one-click upsell later on the time is like, it doesn't cost you any more to add some other smaller items to that order. If you already know you're going to be repackaging something on the other end, add more. Kind of a different concept than I think brands typically think about when they're dealing with bracketers, but can be an effective strategy to try to increase AOV and get a little more lifetime value out of those purchases.
Now, let's talk about lifetime value for a minute. I would think there's a direct correlation between handling the first category I laid out there, dissatisfied buyer, meaning for some reason the product didn't meet expectations, didn't fit something, right? That seems to be the sweet spot for going the extra mile to try to delight that customer and keep them as a return client. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it is also possible with the second category too. If you can convert that two purchases into one size and you know a little bit about the shopper, you can actually give some recommendations for other products that aren't just a variant exchange between a big and a small or whatever that is, that can go a long way. With exchanges, we've run several studies on this, and there's been other studies in the market done on this. Exchanges are so good for brands. And because there's still a little bit of operational headache with it, and so they're not cheap per se, right? Because you're still going through some of those expensive of paying employees and restocking, that sort of thing. But if you look at the LTV, like you mentioned, of shoppers who have made an exchange versus all other shoppers, whether or not they made a return, it's actually 2 to 3 times higher for those that made exchanges. And so, go ahead, Glenn.
No, and that's assuming it was a positive exchange or return experience, right?
Yeah, and there are times that people make an exchange, still doesn't work, and then they get the refund. But usually if like the customer wanted that thing originally, and if they're going to stick around as a valuable customer long term, exchanges are your best shot at getting to that point. And there are a lot of shoppers who do get to that point. So my background is in post-sales. There's an interesting thing with onboarding companies to a new technology, and I call it the trough of disillusionment. I read that somewhere. I didn't coin that term, but what it is people get really excited about buying a new technology, new software. Then they get into it, implementation, and there's pain points. It's a little hard. There's change management with employees, and it's actually pretty painful, and you go through this called trough of disillusionment. But what I've learned is if you can get to the other side of that hump, and then they start seeing the benefits and what they wanted out of that software, they are so much stickier than if they didn't go through that trough of disillusionment, and love the team, love your software even more than they would if everything was just smooth sailing. And I actually don't think it's different between a technology brand or a technology company and these e-commerce brands, where if you get to that other side of the trough of disillusionment with a shopper, they're sticky and they're happier than even if they hadn't.
Okay, so interesting. I'm going to dive into that a little bit here. What do you see as broken in today's traditional returns process? Bad or status quo versus best in class?
Yeah, there's a couple of misses, I think, in the market with return providers today. And the first is really that we treat shoppers like a one-size-fits-all. And it's actually fascinating to just think about what's happening with AI and a lot of what's going. I know some startups that are literally trying to create the website or like themes that are different for everyone that's coming to the website based off of who they know or who they can what they can understand about that shopper. And so there's this theme of personalization that is happening, and it's no different in the returns experience. If you think about it, the return experience should be personalized to an individual. And The returns today and what's broken with it is it's a one size fits all. You have a policy. Your policy is there to protect you as a brand from abuse, of just people taking advantage of your goodness. But if you think about it, a lot of times that policy is actually saying, hey, a first time shopper is getting rejected in the return experience, even though they're only 3 days past the return window, for example. We see this happen. You should do everything possible to let that return through. Now, you should tell them and say, hey, you're actually past the return window, but let's go ahead and let you through to get an exchange or to get store credit, right? And you still don't give the refund, but now they're almost like grateful. Oh, like, thanks for still letting me do something to interact with your brand again. And that's not happening in the market today. And there's a lot of examples of that, but if you think of bracketers, that's a different profile. Those should be treated different in the experience. You shouldn't really be giving bonuses maybe for like exchanges, where some brands do that today. But a lot of times if you're using bonuses for incentivizing exchanges, sometimes you're going to be giving it out when they're going to make an exchange anyway, or you're giving it to people who are just repeat abusers of your return policy.
I could even see a bracketer actually deliberately bracketing solely to abuse a subsidized shipping program. Free shipping on all orders over $100. So you deliberately bracket to exceed that threshold, knowing you're going to return the other items later and be off the hook.
That's a great example. And so one of the things that we facilitate at Redo is you should recapture that shipping fee and apply a fee. But you don't want to apply that fee also to your first-time shoppers or to some of the good group you think about. I don't know if it's good or bad per se. Sometimes there's bad with bracketers, sometimes not. But there's anyway, that's like a personalized experience. That's a great example, Glenn.
Yeah, and I maybe I'm old school, but I kind of view that as a version of fraud, to be frank, because the buyer is trying to circumvent kind of the goodwill of the brand or the policy of the brand. What about some of the other more blatantly fraudulent activities that really are pervasive in the returns environment?
Yeah, yep. It is interesting. We'll call it return fraud. It's both like claims, so it even happens with like lost damaged packages, and that can be fraudulent. Sometimes there's return fake tracking ID fraud, so FTID fraud, that is kind of hard to pin down. This has been fascinating learning about that space and realizing that, wow, people are like literally editing labels in Adobe Acrobat and shipping it to like different addresses and circumventing some of the systems. And so doing that, it really is important to have the provider that has access to some of the data to find some of those addresses, some of those shoppers, some of those credit cards, those emails, and that sort of thing. We've actually partnered with a company specialized in this. So shout out to Yofi is the name of the company. They're actually just acquired this week, announced it. Yeah, they've been great partners and in trying to track that down for brands and flag those.
Great. So we'll go back on. You talked about exchanges for a minute, kind of encouraging. What are some other, maybe you gave a couple examples, I think, trying to encourage an exchange over a return type of scenario. Are there any other best practices or strategies that brands can implement to encourage exchanges over refunds?
Yeah, we've already talked about bonuses.
Yep.
The other two things that I'd hit on are A/B testing. If you think about the marketing function of a company, they are testing everything about the website. And then a lot of times with ads too, a lot of A/B testing on wording, on who you're targeting, different groups, and that's all happening. You're literally testing the color of buttons and A/B testing that. The returns experience doesn't get any love. And so there's very limited A/B testing. So that's something that we've built at Redo to help with that is actually A/B testing the types of questions that you're asking in the return experience, A/B testing some of the visuals, and that's something underrated that brands should be doing. The second, and again, this is a little specific to Redo. I actually don't know really anyone out there kind of like working on it or approaching it in the same way, but it's actually using AI. And so we've talked about Redo returns a lot. Redo actually has a lot of different products. We have order tracking, we have an OMS, we have a shipping optimization. There's actually a bunch of different products that Redo. And the reason we've approached that strategy is because we believe that there is actually these touch points in the customer journey that are really critical to actually understand what's going on with the customer that don't really exist in the market. And that actually affects how you can personalize the returns experience, optimized for exchanges. And so understanding that shopper and understanding your product catalog. And so we'll take into account the product descriptions, but even beyond that, with AI, actually associations of products. We've been doing some interesting thing with associations of saying, this product is actually like these products. The shopper wanted this, it didn't work. These are similar products they're actually unique and compared to this product in this way. Knowing and understanding that and having the data then actually allows you to go and offer an opinionated recommendation that's actually right to the shopper. So those are some of the things that we've worked on with a few brands that have been very effective.
Very cool. So, one would naturally assume you encourage an exchange over a refund. That has a massive financial impact to the brand. Do you have an anecdotal kind of example of really what it might do to CLV as an example?
Yeah, that's great. If you're looking at like customer lifetime value, it's actually a little harder to track down. And so you do need to have a returns provider that kind of like runs that analysis, typically, just because it's hard to track down. There's a lot of data. And so we have done that. And there's a lot more data science, honestly, that we want to dive into to kind of surface that for brands proactively than we're doing today. So that's something we're focused on. One of the things that we have done more tests are on some of those A/B tests. And so a couple examples, tangible to think about, is we've worked with a brand who sold bags and they wanted to reduce their return rate. Kind of getting into the details with them, we realized that one style of bag was a smaller version than another style. And so as they were going through it, we A/B tested and said, hey, if we actually ask them and they're returning the bigger bag because it's too big, we actually are opinionated and say, hey, this style is a smaller version. Do you want to try it out? And that one small change ended up increasing their exchange rate by 30%.
Wow.
And so 2 examples this week. So we're doing this across all brands. A brand was using a returns provider. Their exchange rate was 12.5%. We tweaked a couple things for them. It's actually 31% with Redo so far. And another that sells suits, and like suits are hard to get right on sizing.
Yeah, I might be a bracketer on that front.
Yeah, exactly right. Me too. and so that's like a big pain point. Their return rate, if you include exchange, is actually incredibly high for that reason. But switching to Redo and some of the AI things, that one we actually have had AI in a lot of places in their flow. And their exchange rate has increased from 42 to 63%, which for them ended up being it's nearly $1 million a year of savings for them. So it's a big deal.
Do you have any other kind of user case examples of how brands using Redo have successfully transformed returns into revenue opportunities?
Yeah, a couple others that come to mind. There's a t-shirt brand, not anything crazy to think about or complex with t-shirts, but we've actually changed a little bit about their flow that looks at the intent first and then treats customers differently after we understand their intent. And what I mean by that is they might already be intending to exchange. And so in the flow, we just say, hey, what do you want? Exchange, store credit, refund. And when they choose exchange, let's make that as easy as possible to get through and make the exchange. If you choose refund, then what we did is actually we offered a bonus. But instead of just displaying a bonus like a lot of return providers do, we kind of dug in and said, let's actually be opinionated about this and say, hey, do you want to take an extra X dollars to get an exchange? Actually, it ended up increasing by about 40%, relative increase, but still like a big impact for that brand.
Awesome. What operational efficiencies come with reframing returns as part of the customer journey?
Yeah, the most obvious one is in the customer support function. So thinking about just all the questions that come about returns, it's usually a big percentage of a brand's support tickets. Now it depends on the brand, of course, right, and what you sell. But for those that have a lot of returns, it's a high percentage of ticket volume. And these can be things like, what's your policy? Do you offer free returns? And some of what Redo does pre-purchase can help with that. But even after a return is submitted, you get questions where shoppers change their mind. They say, hey, I actually wanted a refund. Let me actually keep this item. We do see that happen. There's sometimes questions about that. There's a lot of questions about return tracking. And where in the process is my return? And so some brands who, especially if you haven't had a returns provider and are looking into one, we've seen brands that are at 15, 20% reduction to ticket volume just from optimizing that experience, which obviously saves costs and frees up some of your employees to work on things in the warehouse or more important projects.
Okay. So curious, self-fulfillment versus outsourcing to a 3PL. Does that change the lens or how you manage the returns process as a brand?
Yeah, I'm actually curious your perspective on this, Glenn. You're the expert here, but from my perspective, it can certainly, just because you're thinking about those costs and what it takes. And again, it's hard as a brand to take the time to really dive into that and do the calculation of how much is it costing me to manage these myself, and just in the employee, especially with like employee labor, right? And breaking that out into just returns. And that's a pretty hard thing to do. And especially at certain scales, you're not even going to think about that until later on. And there certainly becomes a way where, outsourcing that is a big help just for less split focus of the team. There's cost with split focus and that sort of thing. But I'm actually curious if you have opinions on that, Glenn.
Oh, I certainly do. I think the operative word is a qualified or a good 3PL can greatly enhance the efficiency. So just think about headcount. You have efficiencies of scale, right? Economies of scale with regard to dedicated staff already performing pick, pack, and ship and receiving and things. And so folding returns into that is just incremental work into an existing employee base already versus self-fulfill and have your own kind of standalone process. The other thing that really stands out to me from a 3PL perspective, or a good 3PL, is they can bring many different type of return solutions to bear for the brand, contingent on what kind of client experience they want. So for example, my opinion, the easiest consumer-friendly return that there is, if you don't want to get in a car and drive, is a postal return. And if you're a brand direct, or if you're a self-fulfilled brand, you don't necessarily maybe have a postal solution there that's economical, right? But you go a step, obviously you've got UPS stores, you've got FedEx offices, you've got Amazon type of returns that can be done at a UPS store, or those types of things as well. So it gives many other options on the board for a brand. And then, of course, I think 3PLs can put some real slick things together with regard to trained to evaluate the product, restock it where appropriate, minimize the shrinkage, things like that can be really good.
Yeah. One of the things along those lines, at least I've worked with a couple brands who've outsourced returns specifically even, but it's different products need different processes. And I think that's what you're alluding to. But I know one brand whose bedding goes through a very different process for inspection than their clothes. And so because of that, then the 3PL actually can facilitate that and know kind of what that inspection process looks like. I don't know if that is something you've done with IDF or seen with other 3PLs.
Yep, for sure. Nice volley back at me there, Jordan. I like it. Any ideas of like a quick win or two that a brand could adopt right away to reduce friction for customers during returns?
Yeah, I actually have some strong opinions here that you should make returns available to shoppers. And again, it's you want to optimize for long term, right? And so if that's your goal as a brand, optimize for long term and LTV, then you should make that experience as available as possible, and think about it as part of the experience rather than I want to avoid it at all costs. And I really do see both of those pretty prevalent in the market. And my opinion is that the one is the right way to go to optimize for LTV. And so if you think of like super small wins, some brands in their return tracking their order tracking emails, on the very last one when it's delivered, add a button in there that just says, hey, it didn't work out. Like, here's how to start a return. I've even seen brands put a little thank you card in their packing or the
That takes a little, that,
package.
that takes a leap of faith, doesn't it? To say, here, if you want to punt on what you just spent, you want to return it. That's a leap of faith for a brand, right?
It is. It really is a leap of faith. And again, if you have the right provider that is helping you optimize for exchanges and some of the things we talked about, there's a little bit of faith there, but long term, I do think and believe that it's better strongly. Now, again, at the stage of a brand, you might not be ready for that. And I recognize not all brands are equal. And so, depending on your economics, depending on the capital situation of are you well capitalized to be able to start optimizing for those things? And sometimes you're not. But those are easy wins, right? Of adding that or adding a QR code on your thank you note in the package to make it easy and trying to optimize for that experience, right?
Awesome. Thank you. Good point. For the brands listening today, what would be the first step they should take to start turning returns into revenue?
Yeah.
Different twist on the question here, but we'll transition here to maybe some meaningful takeaways for brands.
Yeah, I'm biased, but number one, I'd say sign up for Redo. Shameless plug there, but
Hey,
it's
brother, you've earned it. You've earned it.
yeah, that's great. I really do believe that there's a lot that can be done, and someone specialized that operates both as like a software provider. If you don't have one, find one. I believe that's Redo. If it's not, but still, you should do it if you have any sort of volume with returns, and that's an easy, quick win. Some of the others are treat it like your website. I've already hit on that, but analyze it the same way. If you haven't gone through the full experience, go through the full return experience. And I'm even talking pay the $6 to ship something to yourself, go through the experience of opening it up, and then go through your return experience.
There's
And
tremendous wisdom in that. And it's shocking how many folks don't ever do that.
totally. There's directors of ecom all the time. Like, hey, when's the last time you actually went through that return experience? And it's surprising that it's just not focused on as much as it should be, but it really is a critical part. So that's the first thing I'd say. The other one that I'd mention is look into your policy. Go read it. Does it resonate with what you're trying to accomplish as a brand? And get data on things. So, hey, your return window, analyze the data. What is the average time that it takes a shopper to submit or start a return? Is that way at the end of your return window? Is it in the middle? Is it way early? That might actually tweak how you think about it, or even extend it further and say, we'll do 90 days because everyone's submitting within 10 anyway. And then the other one is change your policy to actually treat some of the first time shoppers differently, or some of those other groups, high LTV, some of your best shoppers, they spend $3,000 with you as a brand. Of course, I'm saying that's a lot of amount. I know for some brands up end that maybe it's not, but whatever that is, that threshold where those are key shoppers, make it flexible. And that can come with a loyalty program and other things maybe too. But those are some of the quick wins that I would say are first place. Returns provider, go through the experience, and then kind of optimize your policy with data.
Awesome. I think those are some great takeaways for brands. I'm gonna ask you one more substantive question. Okay, what excites you the most about the future of returns management?
There's a lot, and I'm very excited about a few of them. We've talked a little bit about AI. That is my number one thing that I believe will be very important for returns in the future. Just to go a little bit deeper into some of the things that we're doing, if you can really understand the shopper and really understand the product catalog, you can actually act almost like an associate. If you think of the best retail associate in a store, and if someone's coming and making a return, what are they doing? They're getting to know the shopper. They know the product catalog cold and everything in that store. They're asking, getting to know them, talking about why it didn't work out, and trying to suggest genuinely to help them products that should be better. And online, you just lose so much of that. But with AI, it's changing the game. And so you actually can know the shopper, can know the products, and even associate. We're building ways that you can associate the products, like I mentioned. They're going to bring that retail experience into online.
Super cool. So a curated buying experience online, right?
Yep.
Specific to Glenn Gooding's demographic and buying practices, or Jordan Bleak's, or whomever.
Totally. Yep, and everyone is different, right? I have a certain style and I want those things. And if I purchase from a brand, I like something. Surely there's something in that store that we should optimize for. So there's a lot more that I'm excited about with international. It's a black box for brands. Really want to help there. And there's a lot we're doing right now to help with that for brands, a lot with fraud, also a black box for brands. And then warranty is the last one that I just briefly mentioned. Just warranties are a return with a really complex policy and sometimes black boxy and painful too.
You bet. Maybe we'll have you on again and dive into some of those nooks and crannies, those black boxes. Well, I really want to thank you for joining me today. I think my listeners are going to get a ton of value out of this. I want to give you an opportunity to shamelessly plug again. Okay. So where can listeners connect with you or learn more about Redo?
Yeah. So first place, go to our website, getredo.com. It goes over a lot of what we've talked about today. Really, I do recommend just talking to one of our salespeople if you are serious about looking into a returns provider, but you can sign up there. And there's also a lot more about the other products that we're building. A lot of AI and what we're doing really is based around trying to build and aggregate a lot of those touch points for the shopper experience and being able to now utilize them in those touch points across different products. So there's a lot more that you can learn there. If you are interested or want to connect, honestly, just email me. It's jordan@getredo.com. Happy to connect there or on LinkedIn. There's not too many Jordan Bleaks out there.
One of a kind. Jordan, thank you so much. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of Parcel Perspectives. I found it very interesting and frankly, I think a very rewarding topic if you take care of this process and view it as a revenue opportunity. Until next time, thank you.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to Parcel Perspectives, hosted by me, Glenn Gooding. I've been in the small parcel space for 37 years, starting with a deep and broad background working for one of the major carriers as an operator and industrial engineer, later managing pricing at the highest level for the largest, most complex shippers in the world. Since then, I've been a national thought leader and worked to help drive strategy for clients from Fortune 50 companies to startup e-commerce businesses, helping them more competitively align in this complex and expensive market. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and share with friends. Join us next time for more expert advice and strategies to stay ahead of the shipping game.